Almost all the marriages in my family have been arranged marriages. My mom's marriage to my bio dad was an arranged marriage, but it ended up in a messy divorce and him completely abandoning us before I was even born. My mom had a love marriage the second time, despite the disapproval of her family, and has been much happier with my stepdad than she probably would have ever been with my bio dad. Because of this, my mom has always been very adamant that she would not try to force us, my siblings and I, into arranged marriages despite what the rest of our family thought. I've been with my fiancé for 3 years now. We got engaged 2 months ago. He's met my parents and siblings, but as far as the majority of my extended family were concerned, I was single until 2 months ago. Early last year, my fiancé dropped me off home after work one day and my uncle was there. My uncle is the oldest sibling my mom has, so he's seen as the head of the family. He thinks he has a say in what the rest of us do. It was obvious my uncle was pissed, and he ended up grilling my fiancé, and I assume he met his standards. A lot of arranged marriages are about what both families can gain from one another, so he told my mom to get us married quickly. He wanted to make it look like we had an arranged marriage before the rest of our family found out. My mom ignored him and told us to keep dating if it's what we wanted. Over the past year, he's mentioned me getting married to my mom every single time he's spoken to her. Apparently, my uncle assumed just because he'd given the order that we were going to get married soon. He told my cousin, his daughter, that I had agreed to an arranged marriage, and because I had and she was older, she should agree to the match he'd found her. My cousin never mentioned this to me, but she did agree to marry the man my uncle found for her. They got married late last year. They haven't had a good marriage and my cousin is very unhappy. Her husband is incredibly controlling and hardly ever lets her go anywhere without him or a member of his family. Last week, she was over at my house when my fiancé came over to drop some of the clothes I'd left at his place over. When I told my family about my engagement, they all assumed it was an arranged marriage and I didn't bother clarifying because it really isn't anyone's business. You don't tend to do sleepovers if you're having an arranged marriage, so my cousin knew immediately it wasn't what she assumed. She started asking me questions about my relationship and I answered honestly. She got really angry at me and kept demanding to know why I didn't tell her about him. The thing is, I'm very close to this cousin, but I also know how our family is about dating and I didn't want my male cousins trying to strong-arm my fiancé. They've jokingly threatened this before. She pretty much blamed me for her arranged marriage and said she only agreed because she thought I was going to have one too, and if I had told her I had a boyfriend, she would have had the courage to stand up to her family. She hasn't spoken to me since. I do feel bad for her. I know how unhappy she is, but if she had mentioned what my uncle told her earlier, I would have clarified. I don't want this to be the end of our relationship, but I don't know what I can do to fix this. My 7-year-old daughter's doing virtual school in our living room recently. I heard her teacher address a girl named Kelly a few times, which stuck out to me because my daughter's class is only about 15 kids and I know them all by this point in the year. A couple times more and I realized she was calling my daughter Kelly. My daughter's name is Keely, pronounced Keely. So after school was over I asked her if that had been happening all year in this teacher's class and she said it had and it really annoyed her. I asked her why she hadn't corrected the teacher if it annoyed her so much and she said she had repeatedly at the beginning of the year, but the teacher kept calling her Kelly, so eventually she gave up on reminding her. I sent the teacher a quick email explaining the misunderstanding but got no response. This teacher teaches a special subject, think music, gym, art, or language, not just one grade level. So my daughter will be in her classes for the next several years, so we couldn't just wait it out. And how moments like these are handled now will set the stage for how my kid deals with similar situations on her own in the working world. I encouraged my daughter to come to class early or stay later again, thinking maybe she hadn't heard or understood her last time. So a quiet one-on-one would be better. She got to the class early and she told her very politely that her name was Keely like really, instead of Kelly like jelly. And that people often get it confused, so she just wanted to clarify. So class starts and sure enough she gets called Kelly again almost immediately. So there's only so much self-advocation a 7-year-old can be expected to do. I just walked over and said, "Hi, this is Keely's dad. Hers name not Kelly. It's Keely." A few hours later, I had an email in my inbox inviting my wife and I to a parent-teacher conference with the vice principal. The long and short of the meeting ended up being the school feels that while the teacher probably should have learned her name, that the real problem is she feels I challenged her authority by correcting her in class, and that the names were similar enough for it to not have warranted such drastic action. That surprised me. I couldn't believe a meeting was necessary, let alone that it cast blame on us. I can't tell if I'm being that annoying, my kid matters most parent that my grandmother the schoolteacher always complained about, or if the teacher should just learn her damn name, because that's a basic part of her job. I am a 45 years old woman. My husband and I have a 15-year-old daughter Kate and a 9-year-old son Sam. My husband has a brother and a 40-year-old sister, Eva. Eva and her husband James have a daughter, Allegra. She is also 15 years old. Kate and Allegra have always been compared in the family. From the time they were born, it seemed to be a competition of who would walk first, talk first, do more, achieve more. And Allegra was always first. I won't go too much into detail about Allegra because that's not really the point, but I will say she's a beautiful, intelligent, truly one-of-a-kind girl, and her parents have done a great job raising her. My in-laws fell in love with her and think she hung the moon. This bothered me and made me sad for Kate, but I let it go for the most part. There's no doubt in my mind that they love all the kids equally, but out of the two girls you can tell who they admire more. Every summer, the whole family visits a holiday home that Eva shares with my in-laws. Over the summer, Kate met a boy, Luke, who was also holidaying in the area. They started dating. This was Kate's first experience with boys. Allegra had friends who were nearby, so for our first few weeks we didn't see her much. About 3/4 of the way through the holiday, Kate invited the boy she'd been seeing to dinner. Allegra was told to come, and afterwards she would be going to a party. At the dinner, it was clear that Luke was very attracted to Allegra. After dinner, Luke decided he would go to the party Allegra was going to, as he had also been invited. They both asked Kate to go, but she wasn't allowed and was very upset. My husband and I felt it was not a safe or appropriate environment at her age. Eva informed us, because she knows we do not allow Kate into these environments, that it was an adult party, where there would be drinking and possibly other things going on. Allegra has grown up in a place where these kind of things are much more normal. And Eva and her husband made the choice to let Allegra live those experiences. From what I know and have seen, she handles it exceptionally and it has not caused any issues. However, it is not the way we have chosen to parent Kate, and so we didn't allow her to go. The next morning, Allegra came downstairs and asked to talk to me and Eva. She said at the party Luke was flirting with her and showed her some messages he'd sent her. We decided we would all talk to Kate. Kate spent the next 2 days miserable. When she finally came out of her room, Kate was caustic and everyone was getting a bit fed up with her attitude. Eventually, my father-in-law jokingly said, "Your mistake was introducing him to Allegra. How did you think that was going to go for you?" My mother-in-law told him off but added that Luke handled it terribly, but the outcome was sort of inevitable. Kate left the table in tears. We managed to get through the rest of the holiday, but when my husband brought up plans for Christmas, Kate refused to go. She said she couldn't bear being ridiculed by her own family and constantly compared to Allegra. After seeing how much this was affecting her, I spoke to my husband and said we shouldn't go. He argued that it would be wrong to let Kate take away time with family just because of a boy. I reminded him that this has been happening since they were born, but he said that we can't shield Kate from every special person in the world. He said he would talk to his parents about their comments, but that we should not set a precedent of letting Kate run away from reality. Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount and I didn't want to be braggy about it. Especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place. And in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he's started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister. But it was for non-profit work making $22K //year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity //equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen and we haven't really talked since yesterday.